Long ago, before phones, before books, before schools like we have today, people still had smart people and not so smart people. That part never changed. But here's the twist. Most people back then could not read. Most people could not write. Not because they were dumb. Not at all. It was because reading and writing were hard to learn, and very few had the chance to learn them. So here is a question for you. If almost no one could read, how did people know who was smart and who was not? That is what we are going to talk about today. Many of us think like this. If you can read, you are smart. If you cannot read, you are not smart. This feels true today. But it was not true back then. Not even close. Ancient people had their own way of finding out who was wise and who was not. They did not look at books. They looked at how a person spoke, how a person acted, how a person solved a hard problem in front of everyone. Let's slow down for 1 second. Think about a farmer 3,000 years ago. He never held a pen in his life. He could not write his own name. But he knew when rain was coming just by looking at the sky. He knew how to save his family from a hard winter. He knew how to fix a broken tool with just his hands and a few rocks. Was this man dumb? No. He was smart in a way that mattered for his life. Now think about a scribe in ancient Egypt. A scribe is someone who wrote things down for a living. He could read. He could write beautiful words on paper made from reeds. But many scribes just copied old words again and again. They were trained to copy, not always trained to think. So who was smarter? The farmer or the scribe? You see the problem now, right? Reading and writing is a skill. It is a very useful skill. But it is not the same thing as being smart. It is not the same thing as having wisdom. Ancient people understood this better than we do today. They had their own tests. Real tests. Tests that had nothing to do with letters on a page. In this video, we are going to travel back in time. We will visit ancient Greece, where men proved how smart they were through talking, not writing. We will visit ancient China, where wise teachers judged people by how they acted, not by their books. We will visit old kingdoms where kings asked hard riddles to test the minds of their guests. And we will visit old African villages, where one man could hold the whole history of his people in his memory alone, without a single written word. By the end of this video, you will understand something important. You will understand that being smart and being able to read are two very different things. They can go together, but they do not have to. And here is something else to think about. Even today, we still make the same mistake. We think a person with a big degree is smart. We think a person with no degree is not smart. But is that always true? Maybe the old ways of testing a mind were better than we think. Stick with me for this one. It is going to be a fun ride through history. We will meet kings who asked riddles just to trick their smartest guests. We will meet poets who could not write one single word, yet could speak for hours without ever forgetting a line. We will meet quiet thinkers who were seen as wise not because of what they knew, but because of how they lived. This is not just a history lesson. This is a story about what it really means to be smart. So let's go back, way back, to a time before books ruled the world, and find out how people truly told the difference between a smart mind and an empty one. Let's go to ancient Greece now. This is a good place to start. In ancient Greece, very few people could read. Paper was hard to get. Books had to be copied by hand, one letter at a time. This took days, sometimes weeks. So books were rare and costly. Because of this, the Greeks did something smart. They built a whole way of life around talking, not writing. If you wanted to show people you were smart in ancient Greece, you did not hand them a book. You stood up. You spoke. You argued. You answered hard questions in front of a crowd. This is where we get a very old idea. The idea of a wise man. In Greek, this word is sophos. A sophos was not someone who read the most books. A sophos was someone who spoke with wisdom. Someone who gave good advice. Someone who could solve a hard problem using only his words and his mind. Let's talk about Socrates for a moment. You may have heard his name before. Socrates is one of the most famous thinkers in all of history. But here is something many people do not know. Socrates never wrote a single book. Not one. He did not write because he did not need to. He taught by talking. He walked around the streets of Athens and asked people questions. Simple questions at first, then harder ones. He would ask a person, "What is justice?" The person would answer. Then Socrates would ask another question about that answer. Then another, and another. Slowly, the person would see that they did not understand the question as well as they thought they did. This was Socrates' way of finding smart people. He was not looking for people who could read fancy words. He was looking for people who could think clearly when questions got hard. Many people in Athens saw this and knew right away. A person who could answer Socrates well, without getting confused or angry, was seen as a sharp mind. A person who got confused, or shouted instead of answering, was seen as someone who only seemed smart, but was not. This tells us something important. In ancient Greece, the real test of a smart mind was not reading. It was how you handled hard questions out loud, in front of other people, with no time to prepare. Now let's talk about something else the Greeks loved: riddles and contests of words. The Greeks had public contests where two men would stand and argue two sides of one topic. One man would argue yes. The other would argue no. The crowd would watch closely. Whoever argued better, whoever stayed calm, whoever used clear thinking, was seen as the smarter man. This had nothing to do with reading or writing. It was 100% about how your mind worked in that moment. There is also a very old Greek story that shows this idea in a different way. It is the story of the Sphinx. In this story, a strange creature called the Sphinx sits outside a city. She stops every traveler and asks one riddle. If a traveler cannot answer, the Sphinx does not let him pass. Only a hero named Oedipus is able to answer her riddle correctly. This story was not really about a monster. It was about something the Greeks believed deeply. They believed that a true test of the mind was solving a hard puzzle using only your thoughts. No book, no help, just your own brain, tested in front of everyone. So now we can see a clear picture forming. In ancient Greece, being smart meant speaking with clear thoughts, answering hard questions without panic, solving riddles using only your mind, staying calm and clear-headed under pressure. None of this needed reading. None of this needed writing. A farmer who never touched a scroll in his life could still be seen as one of the wisest men in his village, if he spoke well and thought clearly. Meanwhile, a person who could read every scroll in the library but panicked when asked a hard question, or gave answers that made no sense, was not seen as smart at all. This is a very different way of thinking from what we have today. Today, many people believe a piece of paper, like a diploma, tells us who is smart. But the ancient Greeks would have laughed at this idea. For them, the real test was always live, always in the moment, always about your mind, not your paperwork. And this idea did not stop with the Greeks. Now let's travel to ancient China. Here we find a very different way of testing the mind. But it is just as interesting. In ancient China, a great teacher named Confucius lived a long time ago. Confucius taught many students. He cared about wisdom very much. But his idea of wisdom was not about books either. Not at first. Confucius believed something simple. He believed that how a person acts tells you more about their mind than what a person knows. Let's slow down and think about this. Confucius talked a lot about a kind of person he called a junzi. This word means something like a noble person or a person of good character. A junzi was not just someone smart. A junzi was someone who thought clearly, acted kindly, and stayed calm even in hard times. Here is the big idea. In ancient China, you could tell a wise person not by asking them to read a passage, but by watching how they lived their daily life. Did this person treat others with respect? Did this person stay calm when someone made them angry? Did this person keep their promises? Did this person think before speaking, instead of shouting first? These were the real signs of a sharp and wise mind. Confucius even said that a person could learn wisdom just by watching others. He believed you did not always need a book to grow wise. You could watch a wise old farmer. You could watch a fair judge in the village. You could watch a kind mother raising her children well. All of this was a kind of learning too. This is very different from what many of us believe today. Today, some people think you can only learn from a classroom or from a book. But ancient Chinese thinkers believed that life itself was a teacher. And a smart person was someone who learned well from life, not just from paper. Now here is something interesting. Ancient China also had its own tests for smart minds, and they were often not written tests either. Village leaders were often chosen based on how they solved real problems for real people. If two farmers argued over land, the village would bring their problem to an elder. This elder did not need a law book. He needed a sharp and fair mind. He would listen closely to both farmers. He would ask smart questions. Then he would give a fair answer that made both sides feel heard. If the elder gave good, fair answers many times, people in the village began to call him wise. Not because he read many scrolls, but because his mind worked well when it truly mattered. This is a very old idea, but it still feels true today, does it not? We still trust doctors, judges, and leaders more when they show good judgment in real moments, not just when they show us a diploma on a wall. Now let's add one more piece to this puzzle. In ancient China, there was also a strong respect for something called practical wisdom. This means using your mind to solve real, everyday problems. A person did not need to read to have practical wisdom. A skilled potter, who never read one word in his life, could still be seen as a genius with his hands and his mind, because of how well he understood clay, heat, and shape. A rice farmer who knew exactly when to flood his field and when to drain it, without needing a single written guide, was seen as sharp and wise too. This tells us something powerful. In ancient China, just like in ancient Greece, the real test of intelligence was not about reading. It was about how well your mind worked in real, everyday life. So now we have two ancient cultures, very far apart from each other, both agreeing on one big idea. Being smart is not the same as being able to read. The Greeks tested minds through talking and solving riddles in public. The Chinese tested minds through good behavior and fair thinking in daily life. Neither one of these tests needed a written word. But we are not done yet. There is one more powerful way that ancient people tested the mind, and it may be the most surprising one of all. It comes from cultures where almost no one could read or write. Cultures where the human memory itself became the greatest tool for showing intelligence. Now we come to one of the most amazing parts of this whole story. This is about people who could not read at all, in whole cultures where almost no one could read. Yet these people held huge amounts of knowledge inside their own heads. Let's start in West Africa. Here we find a very special kind of person called a griot. A griot was a storyteller, but he was much more than that. A griot held the whole history of his people inside his memory. Names of kings from hundreds of years ago. Big wars. Family lines going back many, many generations. Songs. Laws. Old sayings passed down from father to son. None of this was written down. All of it lived inside the griot's mind. Think about this for a moment. A griot could stand in front of his whole village and speak for hours. He would not read from any paper. He would not need any notes. He would pull every single word from deep inside his own memory. Now here is the big question. How did people know a griot was truly smart? It was simple. They listened closely. If a griot made a mistake, if he mixed up two kings, or forgot an important name, people would notice right away. A true griot had to be perfect. His mind had to hold thousands of details, all in the correct order, all ready to come out the moment he opened his mouth. This is why griots were treated with so much respect. Their minds were seen as a kind of living library. A smart griot was priceless to his village, because he protected the whole memory of his people. Now let's travel to ancient Greece again, but this time, let's talk about something different. Let's talk about Homer. Homer is famous for two huge poems, the Iliad and the Odyssey. These poems are very long. If you read them today, they would take many hours to finish. But here is something surprising. Many old stories say Homer could not see. Some say he was blind. And here is the biggest surprise of all. Many people believe Homer did not write these poems down himself. He spoke them. He held them in his memory, word for word, and shared them out loud. Before these poems were ever written down, they were passed from person to person, by voice alone, for many, many years. Skilled speakers, called bards, would sit in front of crowds and speak these long poems from memory. Every word, every line, perfectly placed. Think about how sharp a mind needs to be to do this. Thousands of lines, all in perfect order, all without one written word to help. This is why bards were seen as brilliant minds in their time. Not because they could read, but because their memory was so strong, so clear, and so exact. Now let's go to ancient India for a moment. In ancient India, there were old sacred texts called the Vedas. These are some of the oldest religious texts in the world. But here is something amazing. For a very long time, the Vedas were not written down at all. They were remembered. Priests and students would memorize the Vedas word for word. Not just word for word, but sound for sound. Every little sound had to be exact. If a student made even one small mistake in how a word sounded, his teacher would correct him right away. This teaches us something powerful. These ancient priests were seen as some of the smartest, most respected people in their whole society. And they earned this respect without ever needing to read one single word. So now, let's put all of this together. In West Africa, sharp minds held entire histories inside their memory. In ancient Greece, sharp minds held long, beautiful poems inside their memory. In ancient India, Sharp minds held sacred sounds and words inside their memory, passed down perfectly, generation after generation. None of this came from reading. All of it came from a trained, powerful memory. This shows us something we often forget today. Before writing became common, a strong memory was one of the biggest signs of a brilliant mind. People did not need paper to prove they were smart. Their own minds were the paper. But memory was not the only test out there. Kings and rulers had their own favorite way of testing sharp minds too, and it often came in a very fun and tricky form. Riddles. Now let's talk about one of the most fun ways ancient people tested a sharp mind. Riddles. Long ago, kings and queens loved riddles. Not just for fun, but as a real test. A hard riddle could show, in just a few seconds, whether a person's mind was quick or slow. Let's go to an old story about a queen named Sheba and a king named Solomon. In this old tale, the Queen of Sheba travels far to meet King Solomon. She has heard he is very wise. But she does not just take people's word for it. Solomon answers every single one with ease. Because of this, people across many lands began to speak of him as one of the wisest kings who ever lived. This tells us something important. Even queens and kings did not trust titles alone. They wanted proof. A real test, right there in the moment. Now let's go to a very different place. Let's go to Old Norse stories from Northern Europe. In one old tale, a king named Vafthrudner loves riddle contests so much that he invites the god Odin into his hall for a battle of questions. Whoever cannot answer a riddle loses their head. This shows just how seriously ancient people took these mental battles. To them, a sharp mind was worth more than gold, and sometimes worth more than life itself. Even in Old English stories and old riddle books, we find the exact same pattern. A traveler meets a stranger. The stranger will not help, will not share food, will not open a door, until a hard riddle is answered first. Why did so many different cultures love this idea so much? Because a riddle cannot be faked. You cannot memorize your way through a brand new riddle you have never heard before. You must think. Right there. Right then. With no book. No help. No time to prepare. This is why riddles became such a powerful tool across so many ancient lands. They were quick, they were fair, and they showed a person's true thinking speed, with nothing to hide behind. Now, let's step back and look at everything we have learned today. We traveled to ancient Greece, where sharp minds were shown through calm, clear talking and public debate. We traveled to ancient China, where a wise mind was shown through good behavior, fair judgment, and practical skill in daily life. We traveled to West Africa, ancient Greece again, and ancient India, where powerful memory was the true mark of a brilliant mind. And just now, we traveled through old kingdoms where riddles were used to test kings, queens, and travelers alike. In every single one of these places, one thing stayed exactly the same. Reading and writing were almost never the true test of intelligence. The real tests were about thinking clearly, acting wisely, remembering deeply, and solving problems quickly, all without paper, all without books. So why do we think so differently today? Well, as more people learned to read over time, reading slowly became linked to schools, and schools became linked to success. Over many, many years, we began to mix these two things together in our minds. We began to believe that a person who reads well must also think well. But as we have seen today, ancient people knew this was not always true. A person can read every book in the world and still make poor choices. A person can hold no book at all and still carry deep wisdom inside their mind. This does not mean reading is not important. Reading is a wonderful gift. It opens doors that were once closed to most people in the ancient world. But reading alone was never proof of a sharp mind. Not then, and maybe not even now. So here is something worth thinking about. The next time you judge how smart someone is, think about the old ways. Think about the Greek debates. Think about the Chinese elders. Think about the African griots. Think about the ancient riddle contests. Maybe true intelligence was never about how many books a person has read. Maybe it was always about how clearly they think, how wisely they act, and how well their mind works when it truly matters most. And maybe, just maybe, the ancient world understood this far better than we give them credit for. Thank you for watching this journey through history with me. If you enjoyed learning how ancient minds were truly tested, think about which ancient test you would have passed the best. The talking test? The memory test? Or the riddle test? Let me know what you think, and I will see you in the next video.